love the words of that song. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. I'm here with both JB and Kirk. Good evening, fellas. Happy Shabbat.
Good evening.
It is a pleasure to be with you. For those who tried to log in last week, or for the most of you who listened to the archives and couldn't find a show last week, we were unable to bring it to you last week. Try as we might, but Blog Talk Radio was down, uncooperative, and inoperative last week. Whatever it was that had them inoperative has since been resolved. Both JB and I think we brought up the site and began testing it probably 8 to 10 hours early today just to make sure it would work. I wanted to share just a little bit of how we got here, because I think it's the journey sometimes is important, and I just like to reminisce as to how we came to this place. After I had written all the books except Introduction to God and Questioning Paul and Introduction, our Observations for Our Time, one of the most avid readers and significant beneficiaries of the books, a gentleman that I still correspond with via email, had come out of Roman Catholicism to be part of the covenant. His name is Jim Doyle. And Jim loved the books, enjoyed the fact that I had done, I guess I did 5,000 hours of talk radio as the guest of virtually every host in the country on Prophet of Doom, and had begun to do portions of Yada Yah. He recognized that while there is a lot of power, and I prefer the written word, and as I think all you know, I strongly prefer the written word. I just think it has more endurance. It's far more open to verification. You know, particularly with today's search engines, you read it online, you can take anything I've said and copy and paste it in a search engine and find out if the word really means that, and research even the histories that I might be presenting. It's a medium that is especially conducive to being validated, or invalidated as the case may be in some cases. It's kind of why very few of the conspiracy sites present written information. They have a few headlines, but it's almost all videos of talking heads. Much more difficult to validate. So I really like the written word. I like the enduring nature of it. And I like the fact that it's so subjected to verification. And while he enjoyed the written word, he said, the spoken word is going to appeal to a broader cross-section of people. You may love the written word, but not everybody does. And there's things you could convey orally that are going to draw people into the books. And so Jim asked me, after I'd done the 5,000 hours of syndicated radio shows as someone else's guest, to do a show. And I told him no. I said, I don't want to do it because I'm concerned that I will embarrass Yahweh. That was the reason I didn't want to do it. And I've shared this before. The reason that I was concerned I might embarrass the author of the statements that we were analyzing is that I recognized that I did not know as much as a lot of the scholars that could call in and question me. And in this medium, was concerned that I wouldn't be prepared to provide the right answer at the right time. And I knew that while I was learning to read Hebrew and learning to translate Hebrew, that a Hebrew scholar could make me look inadequate. And so I didn't want to do it. I didn't care if I embarrassed myself. But we're talking about the Word of God here. I don't want to embarrass the author, so I just said, no, I think I better stick to writing. Because the writing, I can lay it all out. And, if you want to challenge it, go after it. We've never found anybody that could challenge anything that was written in these books. In fact, everyone is encouraged to challenge it, and no one has come out with any conclusion other than, yeah, everything that you say is clearly justifiable. Validated. Kirk and JB, you were great examples of it. You went at it independently and found that, there's every reason to come up with these translations and almost no reason to support the existing ones. So I told him no. I just told him no, I'm going to stick to writing. Well, he didn't take no for an answer. And sometimes that's just what it takes. He was right, I was wrong. And so he actually went to a site that we're using now that was nothing at the time, Blog Talk Radio. And he set up the account, set up the first shows. He says, you're all set up. Here's your username and password, and it's on Blog Talk Radio, and I've already set up the shows. And I had made a deal with the Almighty saying that I would never turn down an opportunity. I wouldn't solicit any opportunity. I would never turn down something. So there I was. And I began to do them. And then the original author of some of the books that I was writing joined me. And then you remember Yoel, the gentleman that's a brilliant gentleman that had created all the websites to support the books. Then he joined me. And we had a ball doing it. And it wasn't long after that I began with Jerry McLaughlin, was the person that introduced me to Genesis Communication Network. And then we syndicated a show, and I got to know Scott Bertank, a wonderful Scott, who's now down working in Austin for what is in the top 3 or 4 radio shows in the country. And we had a ball. And it transformed Scott's life, I think transformed a lot of people's lives on Shattering Myths as we reached a much larger audience and had many more callers. And you know what I learned along the way is that it doesn't matter if somebody knows more. And we know a lot. Let's not kid ourselves. We have learned a lot. We know a lot. We probably know more than most scholars. But there's something that trumps knowing. Knowing is infinitely better than anybody's religious faith. But there's something more powerful than knowing, that's understanding. And so once we understood who Yahweh is and what he's offering, what he's asking in return, what he thinks about religion and politics and the covenant relationship, then it didn't matter if you were debating 1,000 elite scholars. We had what they didn't have, and that's all that mattered. Understanding.
The only real problem with debating scholars is it takes forever to debunk their lies, whereas they can spout a lie in 2 sentences.
That's always been the case in religious debate. The lie is easy to state, and while it is easy to refute, it takes a lot of time to come up with the right methodology to refute it with evidence and reason, and so lies are always more difficult to refute than they are to make. And yeah, that says a lot of that. But the fact is that Jim Doyle was right, and this show and Shattering Myths were the direct result of that. And I'm delighted that we have been down this path. And since the time that he booked that first show on Blog Talk Radio, terrestrial radio has gone by the wayside. Now, even in those programs that are nationally syndicated on traditional radio, pick up a church radio, 95% of the audience is online. Mm-hmm. Podcasts, archives. And so he not only recognized, or at least put us in the right direction to capitalize on the right forum to communicate this message, to make it available to anyone in the world whenever they want it. And those of you who archive this show, thank you. Because people listen to it. They can find it. And it puts it in a position where it doesn't come to you unless you solicit it. If you're interested, it's there. It's free. Takes you to the books that prove it. And if you're not interested, then you don't need to listen.
I think that's
perfect.
probably the best thing this show accomplishes is, it may be someone's first introduction, and it's enough to pique their interest, and then that sends them to the books.
Correct. Yeah, the books are vastly more detailed. The books provide proof. What we're talking about here is the insights that we can derive from the statements that Yahweh made, but we're not here to, in the audio version of this message, to prove that this translation that we're sharing is accurate. You want to prove that it's accurate, or try to take it on and prove otherwise, then go read it online. It's there in its entirety. You can go to Amazon and search for Yada or Yada Yah or for my name, Craig Wynn. You'll find all of them. They're all there, and you can validate them for yourselves. That it's not only mind changing, it's life changing. God is so different than the religious God, so much more likable, so much more approachable, offering so much more. And is so forthright, brilliant communicator. And as it turned out, while we had the issue with Blog Talk Radio last week, where it was inoperative, and two things are important to say. One is that Blog Talk Radio is, according to Jerry McLaughlin, who was so essential to us getting this message out, played such an enormous role in our ability to share Yah's message with the world. Without Jerry McLaughlin, this just doesn't happen. And I think he told me the other day that Blog Talk Radio is now the number one purveyor for talk radio programs. And so we ended up in the right spot. So we need to thank him. We need to thank Jim, and I appreciate you guys making your contribution now to having an audio medium that gives people the chance to listen to Yah's word wherever they may be, whenever they wish to listen, all validated in writing so that someone can go and ascertain the truth for themselves. Now, that said, what I want to share is just quickly review where we were a couple of weeks ago. And this begins happy, fortuitous, blessed. I like the more technical definition of Ashri. By walking the correct and straight path, the enjoyment of a favorable outcome and a meaningful life awaits. Listen, there is just one path in the Torah. It's the path that leads through the Moed Mikre. It begins with the doorway to life, Pesach. It's followed up by the threshold to Yahweh's home, Matzah, whereby we are adopted into his family, Bekurim, so that we're enriched and empowered on Shabuah, given the opportunity to be part of the solution, to warn people against religion and politics, and to convey the emancipation and empowerment and enrichment that comes with accepting Yah's way through Tabuah, in recognition that ultimately his family will be reconciled on Kippurim, leading to us all camping out with the creator of the universe in his creation for all eternity on Sukkah. That's the one path. The path is the path of the covenant. And so I really like getting away from the religious connotations of blessed. Yeah, we're blessed, but only in the sense of that Ashri is based on Asher. And as a word, Asher speaks of walking the correct and straight path regarding a relationship that is not only enjoyable, but leads to the most favorable of outcomes, but also provides a meaningful life along the way. I think a lot of you know that I had a fairly meaningful life from a worldly position. I took 2 businesses public that I created. I've written a lot of books. done a lot of things in my life. And so by human standards, it's really a meaningful life, and by human standards, with a very favorable outcome. But none of that really matters in the end. What matters is the favorable outcome that awaits all of us in the covenant. Eternal life. Perfection. Being adopted into the Creator's family. Being enriched and empowered by Him. Given the opportunity to be His troubadours here on earth. To aid and benefit the ultimate reconciliation of His family, then camp out with Him for all time. That is the ultimate favorable outcome. Nothing monetary in it. There's no human attribute of success in it. It's being part of God's family. That's the most favorable outcome. And that's what Asher and Ashery, as a derivative of it, means. But I'm going to tell you, the last 20 years of my life have been vastly more meaningful than anything I've ever done. I think it's true for all of you.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
The Torah provides meaning to the here and now. You know, when you first are confronted with the fact that there are two trees in the garden, one is the knowledge of good and evil, and you're able to understand why good and evil have to be available to those under the auspices of free will for them to have an opportunity to choose the right way or the wrong way. So true, too, is it necessary for there to be a tree of lives, not just of life. Because those of us who are part of the covenant get two lives. This mortal life may be short, but it's meaningful. It's purposeful. It's wonderful. And we get our mortal life, and then we follow that up by eternal life. And the physical life and the spiritual life are markedly different. And so it is a tree of lives, and our lives now are meaningful. You know, it's not just that we recognize there are two lives and that this one is meaningful, but I don't think there's any of us who want to hurry our way out of here when we're called out of the harvest of prior to the time of Jacob's trouble. I'm in no hurry for the true harvest. I'd rather stay behind. Life with Yahowah, no matter what is swirling around us, is still wonderful. And if another soul is reached, if another soul is helped, if another soul is pointed in the right direction, then our life has meaning. And even when we translate and learn and grow, life has meaning. When we give those we love every opportunity to find the truth, to join us on this voyage of a lifetime, life has meaning. So I love Asher. If it wasn't for Asher, none of us would be here. That's the verb that brought us all here. And I like to translate it, walking the correct and straight path. The enjoyment of a favorable outcome and a meaningful life awaits. The individual, Ish, who, just in case you missed the fact that Ashery was based on Asher, who? Asher, beneficially and relationally, correctly and meaningfully, in an upright fashion. Lo halak, does not walk in the defiant counsel, advice, and idolatrous screams, etcha, the revolting approach, deliberations, and direction of the wicked and unrighteous Russia. In the manner of those who have missed the way, chata, he does not present himself, and he does not stand, lo amad. Nor in the assembly of spokesmen who deride and mock does he stray. There is a prerequisite to being part of the covenant. There's a prerequisite for entering God's home. There's a prerequisite for eternal life in God's family. And that is you have to walk away from religion. This is not saying that we never dabbled in it. It's not to say we were never swayed by it.
Yeah.
Just say we don't stand there.
Yeah, we don't stay. We left.
We left.
We walked away.
Yeah.
Right. We walked away. We were all there. We walked away. We didn't stay there. We did not take a stand there. You know, and
just like
that last
Abraham,
verbiage is so important. But it is essential, and it is a prerequisite for the covenant, which is why I'm so glad we put this statement at the end of this chapter called Passing the Test, the open book test that affirms that we understand and have accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant. You got to walk away from that stuff. You can either rely on man or God, religion or relationship. You can't have both. It's one or the other. One is meaningless and errant. The other is meaningful and correct. And then once God is established, this is what you got to give up to be part of my family. And understand that giving it up is scary initially, but then overwhelmingly beneficial once you recognize that you've given up nothing but a lie. God says, to the contrary, instead, in the Torah of Yahweh, in the teaching, instruction, guidance, and direction of Yahweh, he prefers and desires, finding enjoyment and pleasure. That's the choice. Man's way or God's way. Man's instruction, God's instruction. The guidance of the Almighty or the guidance of the flawed and failed. It ought to be a really easy choice. It's surprising that 99.9% of humanity has chosen the way of man, religion and politics and militarism. All failed. Consistently having failed throughout time. And yet 99.999% of humanity chooses this approach when God is calling them to follow his Torah. We're going to read a passage that is a statement from a Christian group, theologians, that speak of all of this as evidence that, you know, the Torah and the Old Testament only provided physical benefits, and that Jesus introduced the new covenant, which had spiritual benefits for all humankind. And that Christians didn't want to just, completely bury itself by physical benefits for those dreaded Jews, where the new covenant was for Gentiles and spiritual and forever, and opposed to just physical and temporal benefits. That's not what this says. To the contrary, in the Torah of Yahweh, he prefers and desires, finding enjoyment and pleasure. Yeah, I can tell you, and I think it's true with all of us, I'm the happiest when I'm studying the Torah, when I follow Yahweh.
I had kind of a rough week at work this week, and then today ended up being real slow and a lot of downtime, and I spent most of my day sitting there translating, and it put me in the best mood I've been in all week.
Yes.
Okay.
And part of that is that when you're translating, what you're doing is studying. You're examining under a microscope Yahweh's testimony. And then you're thinking about the implications of it, and it's consistent, it's rewarding, it's uplifting, it's liberating, it's empowering, it's enriching. It brings you great pleasure. Mm-hmm. There isn't anything other than delight. There's nothing humbling about it. There's nothing derogatory about it. There's nothing negative. There's nothing devaluing or depreciating or anything other than loving, caring, family-oriented, enriching, uplifting. Yeah, it's fun, enjoyable, pleasurable. And that's what we have come to prefer. And regarding his Torah, just in case you missed Torah in the first statement, and regarding his Torah, by the way, now you got Yahweh's Torah and his Torah. I mean, it's not the Torah of the dreaded Jews, is it? By the way, I'm saying dreaded Jews only in mocking the Christian and Gentile approach to Jews, where they want to relegate all the things that they don't like to the Jews. I love Yahudah, Yahudem, Yisrael, just as Yahweh does. I would dare say, if you don't love Yisrael and Yahudah and Yahudem, then you're not.
You can't have a relationship with Yahowah.
You can't. No, that is correct, because he loves them in spite of themselves. So, and regarding his Torah, Yahweh's Torah, he ponders it and speaks thoughtfully and purposefully in the daytime and at night. Isn't that a wonderful verb, this haga? He reviews the information, meditates upon its implications, considers its interpolations, exercises good judgment to render a rational conclusion, and then makes the decision to roar, declaring these conclusions forcefully, emotionally, powerfully. Yeah, this is the thing that Jim Doyle set up. This is the thing that Jerry McLaughlin made possible. This is what we do.
Yeah. Well,
we, regarding Yahweh's Torah, we ponder it and then speak thoughtfully and purposefully about it. We review the information, meditate upon the implications, consider its interpolations, and express good judgment to render a rational conclusion. And then we make the decision to roar, powerfully conveying what we have learned. That's who we are. I don't think we're anything more or less than that. Oh, sure, we're a little more in that we're part of Yahweh's family. That's a lot more. But that's our role. That's what we do.
That's pretty much what Yahweh's family does.
It is it's what we're called to do. It's what we're given the opportunity to do. It's what we enjoy doing. This is a wonderful affirmation that we're doing just as we should be doing. This then leads us, fellas, to Mizmor 19. We have reveled in Mizmor 19 since the first time we came across it. And this is going to be no exception. Because Yahweh has just mentioned the importance of his Torah here again. Let's share what David, the most brilliant person who ever lived, a person whose approach to God was right, by God's admission. Doesn't matter what man says. God said, Dode is right. Now, since we have thousands and thousands and thousands of words still preserved from Dode's lyrics, and God himself told us Dode is right, correct, valid, vindicated. What could be more important than us listening to what he had to say? We've got God's seal of approval on these words.
Yeah.
So what did Dode write about Yahweh and his Torah? He said, Yahweh's Torah, Yahweh's source of teaching and instruction, the place from which direction and guidance flow, is entirely complete, totally right, and perpetually perfect. Well, that's pretty stout. Tamim is eternally without defect or error, lacking nothing, totally correct and true, unobjectionable and absolute in accord with reality, genuine and moral, helping and healing, constant and beneficial, enduring as an integrated whole to the end of time. Well, that's pretty rough on the world's two most popular religions. Christianity with, 3.5 billion adherents? Islam with 1.5 billion adherents, both of which claim that the Torah is true, but have come up with an entirely contradictory replacement for it, either the New Covenant or the New Testament or the Quran. Well, why would you need a replacement?
It's no longer in effect.
Yeah, if the Torah is totally right. How could you promote that which is contradictory to it, that which annuls it, that which replaces it, if the original is totally right, entirely complete? Well, if it's entirely complete, you don't need no goddamn New Testament. By the way, I mean it exactly that way.
Yeah.
God-forsaken New Testament. If the Torah is complete, then you ought not add anything to it, including the Christian New Testament. If the Torah is complete, you don't need and cannot have a Quran. If the Torah is complete, that's it. Now, keep in mind, the Torah isn't just the 5 books that were conveyed through Moshe from Yahweh to us. And that's why it's so important to understand the word Torah. There is at no place does God say the Torah was complete when Moshe passed away. As a matter of fact, the book of Yahusha, who followed Moshe, it talks about him completing aspects of the Torah. Well, and even he didn't complete them, he added to them, because God had more to say. But I have never read a prophecy yet that wasn't interwoven with guidance and teaching and direction. They all are. And so Yahweh's teaching, his guidance, his direction permeate every prophecy all the way through the prophets. JB, you wrote me a letter today that talked about the book of Shabbat, Judges. And you say, there's no prophecy in it, so you're wondering if it's, divinely inspired, because, the proof that a book is divinely inspired is prophecy, right?
Yes.
And when I wrote you back, I said, my inclination is to say yes, that it is divinely inspired, and I've translated a lot of passages out of Shabbat. It really has a lot to say in Shabbat that I think is meaningful to us. And I'm inclined to view it as inspired by Yahweh, even though it's not considered one of the prophets. And what I wrote you was, remember, JB, prophecy isn't just predicting the future. Prophecy speaks of all time, past, present, and future. To be accurate prophetically, to be inspired by Yahweh in the presentation of history and time. You have to be right about creation. You have to be right about the flood. You have to be right about the history of civilizations and the history of Israel in particular, and the interaction between the world civilizations and Israel. You have to be right in pre-recorded history and right as history evolves through the time of writing. And you have to be right about all future prognostications. And there's a lot in Shabbat that speaks of time now past and then present. And it's precisely accurate.
Yeah, my other thing.
That was one of the things that I came across as we
really just the fact that there's nowhere in there where it's Yahweh speaking. It's telling us the actions of these people, and occasionally it attributes something to Yahweh, but Yeah, my concern was, people have a tendency to attribute things to God that aren't necessarily God, and so I was wondering, that was why I was kind of on, because there's nothing in there like with the prophets where it's Yahweh said this, and in the Torah it's Yahweh said this. There's none of that, and so that's why I was wondering, I'm like, is this just a history or is it actually, divinely inspired?
Yeah.
So, like I said, I just never really done a lot of research into it, so.
Yeah. My inclination is that it's divinely inspired and that it is a prophetic text in the terms of the history of the most important people on earth. And that it provides us with some marvelous insights in that regard, and I've enjoyed translating it. But I'm not giving you a definitive answer here. I'm not even sure a definitive answer is necessary.
That was it.
We're not going
I was
to.
more curious if how much you had done, if you had come across any, like I said, anything in there that was like Yahweh speaking, or there was future prophecy. Just because I know you've done more research into it than I have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And my inclination is that it is because the message is so consistent, and all the insights and style that permeates Yahweh's Torah teaching throughout the prophets is embedded in it. So it's never contradicted. It's consistent. Focus on the right people in the right place. And so, my inclination is favorable, but I would say, JB, that there's nothing in it that forms
would disqualify
the basis of my understanding of who Yahweh is, what He's offered, what He's asking in return. It's just some interesting information that helps to pull together the timeline, and all of Yahweh's message to us is rooted in time. He appreciates chronology and context, and it provides chronology and context, so I think it has value.
Can I just say that, even if it was just a historical document, when Yahweh talks about results of walking down the wrong path rather than the correct path, and the results that will come from that, the consequences of making those poor choices, it doesn't have near as much bearing unless someone were to record these actual people, because you have the tribes to the north documented, and I think there's kings, and the Shabbat for the tribes of the south. And in that history, when you go back and examine the words and what he said would happen, now you have a real accurate account that this is exactly what happened. And then when you go to a modern-day history or archaeology and they point out that this, that, and the other has happened, it verifies that once again. So from that standpoint, is totally not only valid, is remarkably helpful if you're trying to put all the pieces together. So it should be in there.
Yes.
It doesn't have to,
Oh, yeah. I definitely think it should be studied.
No, I know you didn't.
I definitely think it's great for the context and the history.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's worth looking at for sure. So, but yeah, I was kind of viewing it in terms more of like the, like you said, like a history. To me, like there's one book. I'm trying to get out of the habit of just because it's in the, especially after Paul, the habit of if it's in the Bible, it's the Word of God. Well, definitely we know that's not. And same thing now. I want to look at the Tanakh and all the Jewish writings are it's like for me, I have a lot of issues with the book of Job. There's a lot of stuff in there that is just so out there and different than everything else that I have a lot of doubt on that one. Mm-hmm. And I don't put Judges into that category at all. But, it was just in that where I'm like, I don't know if this is, necessarily Torah. This isn't God's teaching. This is information that helps us, but it's not Torah.
Yeah. And then, by the way, I have similar concerns on the book of Job. And the timeline of the book of Job and the location of it's problematic because it clearly precedes the Torah from a time point of view. And there's lots in it in terms of a style that we don't see anywhere else. And so my initial inclination is to say that it was not inspired because it's out of context and out of chronology, and the style is inconsistent. any time that I've delved into it and just translated passages, the message is consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm want to include it because the insights are so consistent. Now it gets a little more into the notion of, in fact, it's far more in your face of Hasatan, the adversary. And I just don't see Hasatan as being that big a deal. And in that book, of course, Hasatan's a big deal. He's a significant player. It's the only book that he's a significant player. And in my life and what I have witnessed, he's just not. He's darn near an irrelevant character unless you look at the role that he plays in religion. And maybe it sets up the role that he plays in religion.
So that's the thing is that from everything else, Hasatan's interested in the big picture. He's interested in massively deceiving, not individuals. And that part of it, it's almost like I almost kind of view it almost as like maybe it was like an allegory someone wrote. Someone who knew and understood the Torah really well wrote this as a story to convey some ideas, and that's why it would be consistent. But I don't necessarily think it would be put into that category of divine.
Yeah, because the interaction between Hasatan and someone who has a relationship with Yahowah is essentially non-existent.
Yeah.
And so unless this is a metaphor for the involvement and influence of religion in people's lives, then it has no bearing. And yet, once you're part of Yahowah's family, religion can't play a part in your life. So, there's lots of it that doesn't necessarily resonate with me. So you brought up both books that don't have as much credence as the 5 books of the Torah and all of the prophets. And I would say that if you were just to focus on that which is absolute proof is divinely inspired, the 5 books of the Torah and the prophets, both large and small, you have more
the writings
to
of
learn.
Dode.
And the Psalms and the Proverbs of Dode. Oh goodness, I would say just the Proverbs and the Psalms of Dode with the Torah. You have more than you could ever process in 10 lifetimes.
I think the way you put it was very good. I don't derive any of my understanding of Yahowah or the covenant from Judges. I can use it to understand the histories, and I can learn from it, but it's not. And it doesn't influence our relationship with Yahowah, really.
No. That is absolutely true. So Yahowah's Torah is entirely complete, totally right, and perpetually perfect. Shub, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. So Mr. Christian that had the audacity to write, speaking of the Sermon on the Mount, where Yosha said, "Do not think that I have come to annul the Torah." Not a single stroke of a single letter of the Torah will be annulled so long as the heavens and earth exist. And the Christian theologian decided to ignore all of that and to write, "The words Jesus spoke on the Sermon on the Mount began to define more fully, for the first time, the new covenant agreement God offers to all humankind, unlike the old covenant, which only offered physical blessings. The new covenant makes possible the eternal and spiritual blessings." Hey, guys, nefesh, soul.
Yeah.
Is that a physical or spiritual thing?
Spiritual.
Is there anything about the nefesh soul that is physical?
No, it is completely incorporeal.
Correct. So if Yahowah's Torah is totally right, returning, restoring, and transforming the nefesh soul, this Christian theologian could not be right, could he?
No.
But he is worse than an idiot because he's putting this out, promoting not only a lie, the opposite of what's true. Actually speaking for God and contradicting him. This is exactly the opposite.
Very bad category.
Very Paul.
Oh, yeah. The Torah transforms the soul. That means that every word Paul wrote was wrong. Half the Christian New Testament is destroyed with this one statement that the Torah is totally right and perpetually perfect, entirely complete, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. The Torah is the solution. It's not the problem. The Torah saves, does not condemn. Shub, turning around, bringing back, changing, renewing, recovering. A hiphil participle construct. The subject, who is Yahweh and his Torah, causes the object, our souls, to experience this vivid and self-defining transformation with him, connecting our souls to him through the restoring nature of the Torah. That's probably the most important statement that we have ever shared. We've talked about it so many times. Yahweh's Torah is totally right, completely and entirely complete, and perpetually perfect, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. Just in case you didn't know that the Torah was comprised of Yahweh's restoring testimony and enduring witness, and the nature of Hebrew poetry, where you say the same thing from a different perspective, Yahweh, through his most correct and brilliant lyricist, scribed, Yahweh's restoring testimony and enduring witness, Eduth, his Yahweh's everlasting and renewing stipulations, serving as a way to memorialize this agreement between the two parties for an unlimited duration of time. Eduth is from Ed and Ida, an eternal witness, to an agreement concerning a glorified community of the highest possible status, which gathers together with a shared understanding regarding evidence and a common cause, which is being memorialized so that its conditions and precepts are forever remembered. Is Aman, is trustworthy and reliable, is instructive, informative, verifiable, and dependable, is confirming, supportive, establishing, and enduring, is readily affirmed and easily accepted, building confidence over time, and serves as a nurturing tutor and mentor to validate the written and binding covenant agreement. Oh, if only Christians, theologians had correctly translated Aman, rather than errantly transliterating it Amen.
Amen.
If only. If only. When you understand a bond, you understand there is no value in faith. That belief is a waste of time. It's counterproductive.
All you really have to do to dismiss every English translation is examine when they choose to transliterate a word and when they choose to translate a word.
Yeah,
and how errantly they do that shows you all you need to know about the, person who translated this. When they choose to translate a common word like Aman as transliterated as Amen, they have no care. It's the whole reason I had this conversation with someone one time about baptism. The only reason the idea of baptism exists is because they chose to transliterate a common word from Greek into English.
Right.
Had they translated it, there'd be no such thing. We'd have no idea. You said baptism. No one would know what you're talking about. But they chose randomly this one word that translates completely. Yeah, you can translate baptizo into English, no problem. It's not like there's a problem with that. You can do it, but for whatever reason, they chose to transliterate it, thus creating this mystifying word that they could define.
Right.
And created a ritual out of nothing.
Everyone who prays to God, first of all, is doing something God never requested, and is counterproductive. Praying to God is as counterproductive as is bowing down to Him. Praying to God is as counterproductive as bowing down to it. Bowing down to God is the antithesis of what God wants. He's committed to getting on His knees to lift us up, which He is fully qualified to do and wants to do. And we make fools of ourselves and negate everything He's offering when we get down on our knees and attempt to lift Him up. But prayer is the same thing. We gain everything when we listen to what He has to say.
Mm-hmm.
And we destroy any opportunity we have to listen to Him when we babble nonsense that just simply irritates Him. That's what prayer is. And to think that religious prayers always end, in God's name we pray, Amen, designating the name of the Egyptian sun god.
Mm-hmm. And they usually tag Jesus after that. In the name of God.
Just,
Amen.
Yeah, horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right, JB, when they tell you everything you need to know about their motives, their deceptive nature, when they choose to transliterate a common word rather than translate it. Because if you translate this word, you realize that there is no value in faith. There's no purpose for belief, that God can be known. He can be known. Yahweh's restoring testimony and enduring witness is Aman, is trustworthy and reliable. It's knowable and verifiable. That's what it means.
And, there are words that really do not translate. Nefesh. There is no English equivalent to nefesh.
No.
You really have to kind of transliterate that and then put a paragraph explaining exactly what that is. There's no, that word does not translate well. And there's a reason there are some words like that.
Yes. And nefesh is, since it was in that last statement, the soul, so long as you understand that a soul is different than spirit. And that all animals have souls.
I meant to say nasama.
Yeah, and souls are mortal.
I was thinking of.
Right. And you understand the concept of consciousness. Then nefesh can be translated just as Aman can be translated. Nasama, you're correct. Nasama, there's only one English word that would even come close to translating Nasama, which is conscience as opposed to consciousness. Conscience. And conscience is only a valid translation if you understand the difference between consciousness, nefesh, and conscience, nasama, where one is the inherent ability in all animals to observe what is occurring around them and to respond in a rational and reasonable way. That is consciousness. Nasama, conscience, is the ability to ascertain the validity of that information that was being observed, the merits of it, to discern right from wrong, good from bad, beneficial from counterproductive, to exercise good judgment. But so, it's a word that really doesn't have a good English equivalent. But Aman does.
Yeah.
Aman's easy to translate. It's a very simple verb, and as a verb, it also has a noun derivative. And so, in this case, is trustworthy, is reliable, is informative, is verifiable, is dependable, can be confirmed, readily affirmed, even. Building confidence based upon knowledge.
There's the exact opposite of faith right there.
Yeah. Yes, you can validate and verify. Well, that's the antithesis of religious faith. And so all religions transliterate Avan as if it had no meaning as amen, when in fact it is one of the most important instructions Yahweh ever offered us. Yahweh's restoring testimony and enduring witness is amen, trustworthy and reliable, verifiable and valid, making learning which results in understanding easy for those who are open-minded. Chetem. Well, the Torah leads to understanding. It's teaching which leads to understanding. It's guidance which results in enlightenment. It facilitates the individual to grasp what is being shared, to process it, to understand it, to perceive it. And this is the essence of the Torah versus Yahweh's teaching, his guidance, as opposed to religion. Religion wants you to accept, to obey, to acquiesce, to convert, to believe, and to place your faith in human institutions. Yahweh says, no, what I want you to do is I want you to take the time to listen to what I have to say, to observe my testimony, to recognize that my restoring testimony and enduring witness, my Torah teaching and guidance, is entirely complete, totally right, perpetually perfect. It's reliable. It's verifiable. And it makes learning possible, leading to understanding. It leads to enlightenment, comprehension. These are the things that are so powerful that God has offered us so freely. Nothing is better. And of course, it's a complete negation to everything that could possibly be considered religious. Now, from a third perspective, here's the same thought. Yahweh's principles, his oversight, his directions, his guidance, pakudam, his instructions and prescriptions, which should be considered and acted upon, regarding the assigned appointments, as well as the precepts, procedures, and teaching, because they are observed, attended to, cared about, and they cause the individual and their circumstances to undergo considerable change from pakad, oversight, and caring guidance, which we should pay especially close attention to and carefully examine so that we respond appropriately and benefit as intended. All right? Yashar, straightforward, and thus neither crooked nor circuitous, and upright, and thus preclude bowing down. They are approved, esteemed, correct, proper, honest, and pleasing. Pay attention to what Yahweh says, his directions, his guidance, his pakudam, because they're right. Causing the heart to rejoice, facilitating an attitude of elation and a joyous disposition as a result of thoughtfully evaluating the directions while happily incorporating them into one's life. So look at the terms here. We began with Torah, Yahweh's Torah. Yahweh's Torah is totally right, perpetually perfect, entirely complete, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. Yahweh's Eduth, his restoring testimony and enduring witness, is trustworthy and reliable, valid and verifiable, dependable, making learning which results in understanding easy for those who are receptive. Yahweh's principles, his oversight, his direction and guidance, his pakudim are all right, straightforward, causing the heart to rejoice. What is the next word that Dode uses throughout his Psalms? The mitzvah. Yahweh's instructions regarding the conditions pursuant to his relationship agreement. Create heirs who are brilliant and enlightened. Bar. Provide light for his offspring, which leads to understanding, creating children of the supernatural who become like light, creating favoritism among those choosing and chosen to participate in this most special relationship as sons and daughters, creating descendants who are bright, radiant, and akin to being cleansed and purified, paving the way to an inheritance, to enlightenment and comprehension. If there's a better word than bar, I mean, I'm delighted that we have been enlightened. I'm delighted that we have been restored. But isn't it worth celebrating that the oversight and directions and guidance that Yahweh has provided cause us to be bar? To become heirs who are brilliant and enlightened? What's better than that?
Yeah, how do you put that into words? Yeah.
And bar. Did you have a chance to study the just bar and where it comes from and what it all means?
Well, I mean, it's
not yet.
It's 7:19.
I love this word, bar. Really simple. It's 2 Hebrew letters.
Yeah, just
and what are the 2 Hebrew letters? Bar. It's Be'eth and Rosh. Want to do a study of it? What's the Rosh? It is the observant individual. Yeah. Using their head, their ability to hear, their ability to see, and their mind, their ability to think. So the individual who listens and who is observant and then processes what they have heard and seen regarding Be'eth, the family, the home, the covenant. They become heirs. They're enlightened. They understand. Yeah. They participate in this most special of relationships as sons and daughters. They even serve to help others become descendants.
If you look at the Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you only get that insight if you look at the Hebrew and recognize that the same letters make the Hebrew word for son.
Mm-hmm.
You heard of a bar mitzvah?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't
right.
get that if you were to just go with a simple, basic translation. If you didn't examine that word under the microscope, you'd never get all those insights, and it would never be nearly as powerful as it is.
Right. What are the first 2 letters in Be'eth, the covenant?
Be'ed and Resh.
Yeah. Right. Right. So, and Be'eth, which is the Hebrew word for family upon which Be'eth is based, there is no observant individual simply in Be'eth, family. But in the covenant, Be'eth is family-oriented relationship agreement with Yahweh. There is a Rosh right in the middle of it, and this is the home of the observant individual, the home of the enlightened, the home of the heirs. And that's what the covenant is all about. We become heirs.
Can I throw in something?
Yeah.
Last week, while we were trying to get in, and we could talk to each other, we just couldn't get into the thing. We were talking, I was sharing with JB that I had never thought of it. I looked up Yehuda, the name, in letters, and it's Yahweh's name with a lead in it. I mean, it's no different other than it has the let or delete, and it's the covenant door. And I said, and I think JB pointed out my same thing, and it is that it's the family to be part of God, to be like God. You are empowered by going through the door. I don't know that you would see that if you didn't look at the pictographs. It just never would occur.
No,
and it never did until I've written it down 100 times, but I've never actually studied it per se in the context that I was studying it then. And I said, wow, so JB picked
you got
on
Yahweh's
way.
hand reaching down to the individual, reaching up to expand the family by way of the door.
Yeah,
right.
What a cool word, Yehuda. Who doesn't want to be Yehuda?
Right.
I volunteer for that one.
Absolutely. And here, you had a very simple word, 2 letters.
Mm-hmm.
That Yahweh's principles, His oversight, His directions, and guidance are right. That Yahweh's instruction regarding the conditions pursuant to His covenant relationship agreement are Be'eth Rosh, the home of the observant individual. It's the home of the family of the individual who is observant and listens. Not the person who prays and babbles without ceasing, not the person who bows down. It's the person who uses their eyes to read the Torah and their ears to listen to Yahweh's teaching. Be'eth Rosh. I don't know how you're going to argue with that. You could be the foremost theologian in the world. That's what the letters convey. So Yahweh's instructions regarding the conditions pursuant to His relationship agreement create heirs who are enlightened, illuminating the proper perspective. Fellas, I'm a big fan of perspective. It may mean more to me than maybe anyone else on earth, perspective. I think the perspective from which one reads the Torah, the perspective from which one engages in relationships, the perspective from which one discerns that which is good and bad, beneficial and counterproductive. Your perspective on the world and on life is more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I've tried to do, I'm not going to claim that I'm right. I'm just going to tell you what I've tried to do. I have tried to align my perspective so that I'm viewing Yahweh's testimony. So I'm viewing the universe that He created. So I'm perceiving and analyzing and observing life from the perspective provided by the Torah and Yahweh. I'm trying to translate and then to share based upon putting myself in the same perspective that Yahweh has provided. Because I think it is perspective that enables us to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you teach art. You're an artist, Kirk.
Yes.
And isn't the perspective that you bring to a painting or a drawing the first thing you consider? From what perspective is this being observed?
Sure.
And if you don't have perspective, the perspective is where's the light coming from? Mm-hmm. From what angle is this being presented? What's in the foreground? What's in the distance? How are those things perceived? How does this fit within the context of what the picture that I'm creating? I think that you begin with perspective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, it's the
and
number one
I think
way
it's the beginning of all understanding is perspective.
Yeah.
Are you going to view it through the lens that is religion?
Classes is how to make the subject relative to the student. Yeah, you have to view it from their perspective. How are they going to apply this to their life?
When I spend time with my little granddaughter,
they're not going to do it.
My whole idea of spending time with my granddaughter is trying to view the world from her perspective. I want to share life and love in a way that she will appreciate and understand. If she's a girl and wants to play dollies and wants to play kitchen and dress up, then we're going to do those things, but from a loving perspective, from a supporting and encouraging perspective, a perspective that says, I'm interested in you. You delight me. Mm-hmm. And I want you to be all that you can possibly be. And I'm here to support you and to celebrate our relationship together. That's the perspective I bring to it. That's the perspective I bring to Translate. It's the perspective I bring to the show. Is I want to share what I have learned about Yahowah and want to share His word from the perspective that He has provided. And, in this regard is how I fell in love with the lyrics of David. I think he provides the ultimate perspective on the Torah teaching of Yahowah. Yeah. This is Mizmor 19, 7, and 8. These are 2 lines out of one song. And we could devote 100 programs to these 2 lines out of one song because they provide the proper perspective to understand who Yahweh is, what is He is offering, and what He expects from us in return. And ultimately, for the sake of our souls, for the sake of making this life meaningful, for the sake of those we love, for the sake of humankind at all, what is conveyed in these 2 lines is more important than anything that's ever been conveyed or written or achieved by man combined. Yahweh's instruction regarding the conditions pursuant to His relationship agreement create heirs, those with an inheritance, who are brilliant and enlightened, illuminating the proper perspective. Ain, shining a light for the eyes to see, enabling insightful observation and understanding, shedding a brilliant light on the means to enlightenment, and thereby obliterating darkness, while making the perceptive person aware and thus able to see the light. In the Hippel construct, the conditions of the relationship cause the observant individual to become light and to be bound to the source of the light. Hebrew is almost too good to be real. That is derived from its nuances. A reverence and respect for Yahweh is cleansing and restoring, perfecting and renewing, enabling the individual to present themselves such that they can be pronounced clean and flawless, free from all impurities, and majestically brilliant. Dahor. Sustaining and establishing. Amad. Causing one to remain and endure, continuing to abide. Upright. Forever. Forever. Until Jesus? No. Until the Gentiles replaced the Yehudim? No. Until Rome could destroy
until Paul comes.
Yehudah? No. Yeah, until Paul could say, but I, Paul, say. No. Until the Christian New Testament? No. Until Muhammad's Quran? No. Until the age of enlightenment? No. until America would be born on a hill.
Shining city on a hill.
No. This was written 3,000 years ago by the one person in all of human history that the creator of the universe says, he is my son, I am his father, and he is right. And he just said, a reverence for Yahweh is cleansing and restoring and establishing forever, sustaining and establishing forever. Forever.
Mm-hmm. That means
not for a moment, not until something else happens. And how does one come to revere and respect Yahweh unless you focus on what Yahweh had to say? I didn't read a single word of Yahweh in the Christian New Testament. Never found one. Yeah, there's some Greek translations of Hebrew citations taken out of context and mistranslated, often misconstrued. But the word of Yahweh is only found in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Full stop. If you don't listen to what he has to say, how are you going to revere and respect him? If you don't know his name, how are you going to revere and respect him? If you don't care about these words that he conveyed through Dode in Mizmor Psalm 19, how are you going to come to regard and respect him? And it's our reverence for, our respect for Yahweh, which is the natural derivative of understanding what he has conveyed in his Torah, prophets, and Psalms, that leads to us being established and sustained, and to endure forever. And, I enjoy my relationship with Yahweh. We're buds. We have a great time together. These last few weeks in particular, he has been so very kind to me. It's I want to be careful as I say this, but it's almost like you did what I asked. We had great fun doing this, and there's more fun to be had. But you did what no one else was willing to do. And you did it with passion and enthusiasm. You poured your life into it. And so many wonderful relationships have developed after this out of what we did together that I just wanted you to be happy. I wanted you to experience in a tangible way what you've been writing about all this time. And that's what's happened. I read these words and recognize that the God that I revere, the God that I've come to respect, has sustained and established me, has caused me to endure and stand upright in his presence forever, and that he has provided meaning to this life. And, he's not about, you see this with Dode all the time. I'm more flawed. I can't say I'm more flawed than Dode. Dode is pretty flawed. But, I'm flawed. Yahweh looks past all of it and says, I love you. You're my son. I'm your father. And when you convey what I have conveyed, you're right. And I want you to be happy. Not only in the next life, but just think of all the wonderful things he created in this life to make us happy. And, have a moment to understand why Yahowah was right for Adam, and why Adam was right for Yahowah, and how that design can bring us such happiness, and how it enables us to come together to really to appreciate all that God is offering in terms of family, love, and how it leads us to have a better understanding of who He is, what He's offering, what He expects in return. It's all there. Yahweh means to exercise good judgment and to justly resolve disputes. That's that next word that Dode so cherished in Mizmor 119 that tells us how to observe the Torah. Mishpat. Yahweh, it's, JB, we talked about Shaphat, the book of Shaphat.
Yep.
Well, Mishpat is based on Shaphat. What does Shaphat mean? Yeah, it means to exercise good judgment, to discern between fact and fiction, to evaluate things in such a way that you can come to the proper conclusion and proper response. That's what Mishpat is. It's Shaphat with the ma in front of it. It's the who, the what, the why, the where, the when of exercising good judgment.
Not to mention it starts with the cleansing waters.
Right. Yeah.
The Shaphat cleanse you. They,
But we also know that, and this is really interesting, that, the mem, which is the before Shaphat here, the mem is cleansing waters. The source of cleansing, the source of life, water. But ma is an interrogatory.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it interesting that ma, the ultimate Hebrew interrogatory means simply to question. To question the who, the what, the why, the when, and the where of something. That it's questions that lead to the benefits of water, the source of life, the source of cleansing. You get there by asking the questions, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how of exercising good judgment, in this case, Shaphat. Shaphat means to exercise good judgment. So Yahweh means to exercise good judgment and to justly resolve disputes, understanding the who, Yahweh, the what, the 7 Moed Mikre, the why, so we could be vindicated and be part of His family forever, the when He fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim through Yosha in year 4000, the where, Mount Moriah.
It's sad to think where we live in a world where being judgmental is considered a bad thing.
Oh, political correctness. Political correctness is the antithesis of correct. The opposite of Yahweh. Yeah, Yahweh wants us to question, to exercise good judgment, especially regarding the means to justly resolve disputes. And this is why what we do is so important, not because of us, but because of what we are focusing upon. It's the whole purpose of amplification. For looking through an etymological microscope at each letter of each word. The realization that ma is not only an interrogatory put before Shabbat to judge, to exercise good judgment, but the letter is the source of cleansing in life itself. It's the ability to render rational decisions based upon a thoughtful evaluation of accurate and complete information. Yahweh means to exercise good judgment and justly resolve disputes, mitzvah, are continuously trustworthy and reliable. Emeth are enduring, dependable, honest, consistent, and true forever. They are sadak yada. They are wholly right and completely vindicating. They are in one accord, working in harmony and in unison, all together and united, correct and justifying. causing the recipient to be upright, acceptable, cleared of all wrongdoing, righteous, acquitted, and declared innocent. Oh, Mizmor. Melodious lyric, Psalm 19:9. There are those who have criticized me for having a man crush on Dode. From elevating Dode to a status second only to Yahweh himself. I am delighted to be so accused. I do. This is, of all the men who have ever lived, the man I most want to meet. I'm inspired by him. I'm enlightened by him. I'm guided by him. Enriched by him. I think we all are.
Mm-hmm.
No
one
single
wrote
person
this
has given me more insight into Yahweh. You talk about Moshe. Moshe wrote what he was told. He did write, Dabarim is his word, but it was just reiterating what he was told.
Right.
Abraham, we don't really know much about what Abraham said or did, and a lot of what he said and did that we do know about was incorrect. All
Correct.
these people,
That's right.
aren't there. What Dode wrote offers so much insight into Yahweh and the relationship. I honestly can't think of anyone who did more.
No one.
Can I share something?
That's my answer is no one. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm delighted with what Yosha did in terms of fulfilling and enabling Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and Shabuah. Delighted between what Yosha and the set-apart spirit did in that regard. But the words of Dode are enduring.
Yeah.
They explain what Yosha did. They explain exactly who Yahweh is, what he's offering, what he expects in return, and how we capitalize upon it.
We talked about earlier with the book of Shabbat. I don't let my understanding of Yahweh or my relationship with Yahweh be determined by anything that's in there. I use it for information, and it's valuable. I view a lot of, actually all of the Greek text in that same regard. Everything Yahusha said and did is informative and interesting, but because of the unreliability of the text, I try not to let any of that shape my understanding of Yahweh and our relationship. I can't say the same for Dode. So much of my relationship and understanding of Yahweh comes through the writings of Dode.
Yeah, as for me as well. More so from the writings of Dode than from anybody else. It's Dode that taught all of us how to observe the Torah, how to capitalize upon it. It's Dode that says, "Oh, listen, I got more flaws than I have hairs on my head, but there is no way that Yahweh, you're keeping me out of Shamayim, the spiritual realm, because I'm carrying the Torah with me. Can't do it. I'm in. I know I'm in." It's in this life that we learn everything we need to know.
Let me share a quick remark before y'all get away today.
Okay.
Something has happened the last few weeks that when I've been researching for the show, and I've connected more dots than I ever have in my life. I don't know why, but it's kind of freaky. It's this comes to mind, this comes to mind, and this connection connects to this. And for some reason, when I was reviewing this section here plus the next one, I went back to the promises to the Yehuda from Yaakov when he's talking to Yehuda, "This is your blessing." I never liked the way it's written, translated, so I went through and did it, and maybe next week we can go into it a little bit, because actually, as we were talking, as y'all were just talking now, Dode's the only one that ever came along that was truly Yehudim, from the house of Yaakov to Yehuda, that absolutely fulfilled what it actually told him he had to do. When you translate it correctly, the words instead of ruler's staff to chikwak, to inscribe, to read, engrave, mark, and soak prescriptions for living like the choke and the mitzvah. I'm telling you, as I'm looking at here, and you're going to do it all the way till Shiloh comes, which is the end of man ruling the world, 6,000 years. I'm telling you, he's the only one that did it. So if that was Yehuda's job. And he's the one who did it. So it's absolutely, I think, important that we would obviously that we listen to Dode, and it's not a big deal to defer to him on some misunderstanding. That's exactly what he was supposed to do. Every word in their promise is exactly that. Go look up 49 Barbara She's 49:10. I mean, I worked on it for hours.
Check that out.
Yeah, but just as a really more for the part that's coming after this page, after we get through this one and we get to things there. When you were talking about the verse about before that, 19:7, and all, there's another Psalm, 18:80, that does exactly the same thing. Says it's perfect, is trustworthy, reliable. There are so many connections in this little section. I was just kind of blown away the last 2 weeks as he started the show. And that's what I want
to do next week. Kirk, you began our private time prior to the broadcast of saying that one of the things you enjoyed most is recognizing that we've come to the end of the first volume of Observations for Our Time, the end of this chapter, and the end of the first volume of Observations for Our Time. And it was all based upon the test that Abraham succeeded in, accomplished, regarding affirming that he understood and responded properly to the terms and conditions of the covenant. That's an open book test. It's not hard. It takes a lot of time, really, to understand what God is offering and what he's expecting. And Abraham had it right all the way down the line. It's important for us to know that Yahweh held Abraham accountable, and Abraham came across accountable, and that we are prepared to take that same open book test.
Sure.
And so what you did, Kirk, is to say, well, what did we learn? You know, we've spent show after show after show on this marvelous test.
Mm-hmm.
What did we learn that was important? And so you've written down notes on what you learned.
Yeah.
And next week we're going to do two things. One is we're going to conclude this chapter with a review of something, Kirk, you spent a lot of time on it and devoted shows to, so we'll do it more expeditiously because we really don't have good translations of it. But we're going to begin with the instruction on the Mount.
Okay.
And Yosha affirming all of this, destroying Christianity, destroying Islam, destroying rabbinic Judaism.
It destroys the Talmud. It's the same thing. I don't care who changes what.
Oh, absolutely, because the Talmud is arguments against
the Torah.
The Torah.
I'm going to interpret
and
that.
in favor of human religious control and interpretations. And so there can be no Talmud, no New Testament, and no Quran, based upon the words of Dode that we have just considered and Yosha on the instruction on the Mount. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to walk through what did we learn before we transition to Chapter 1, Volume 2 of Observations of Our Time, which is a really pointed and an essential chapter. It begins like the statement that we began this program with, which is why God is disappointed at human religious and political schemes, and why, if you rely on them, you're not going to be part of his family. He's just not going to allow that rubbish into his home, and thankfully, that's the case.
I'd be miserable if he did, and I don't want to be there.
Oh, just think, this week.
That's this world for eternity. I don't want this
a cardinal was defrocked. A cardinal had to resign. Why? Because he oversaw and hid the molestation by Catholic priests of over 1,000 little boys and girls. He chose to protect his religion as opposed to protect the children that his religion was abusing.
Yeah, I still don't get that.
And that scumbag of a Pope said, "It's with great regret that I'm accepting his resignation." What a scum. If you had a heart, if you understood the importance of hate and of love, and why these things have to go together, you just say, "I despise everything that man stands for. I'm embarrassed by what he has done." Want to completely disassociate from him. And it's with great pleasure that I accept his resignation, because I would have defrocked him. Because there's no excuse for allowing children to be abused under any circumstance. That's what he should have said. But it just reveals the heart and soul of this demented and demonic organization that is Roman Catholicism.
What I don't get with the Catholic Church in this regard is they view it as hurting their religion if it came out that a priest molested a child. No, what hurts you more than that is you covering it up. You're not necessarily responsible for the actions of the individuals within your organization. But when you cover it up and help them get away with it, now you are accountable. If you came out and said, "This guy did this, and we are kicking him out, and we are giving all the evidence we can to get him put in jail for life," people would support that. Nobody would back away from your religion for that. But
guys, you know that I was CEO of...
It's like politicians not admitting when they're wrong.
Yeah. Guys, I was CEO of public companies. And one of the things I learned is that individuals within my companies could do things that I was horrified, that I had instructed against, that I was opposed to. And yet what they did, because they worked in my companies, I was ultimately responsible for them. And it's a horrible situation to be in. But the right thing to do when somebody under your employ does the wrong thing is to quickly separate from them.
Disassociate. Yeah.
Disassociate and publicly announce that what they have done was wrong and that you're opposed to it. And apologize to the victims. And to try to do the best you can to right the wrong. That is not what we've seen.
It's like politicians thinking they lose credit by admitting they were wrong. No, you gain credibility when you admit you were wrong, because it means that you're willing to accept new information and change the way you think. There's nothing
guys,
wrong with
when I was asked for on the one show, those that wouldn't mind writing a letter of accommodation or reference to my character. And I got 20 the next day. The unifying theme of all of them was, this is not only a person who makes everything that they have learned available to anyone freely, but someone who is unique amongst people and will openly acknowledge when they're wrong and want to correct the record. Yeah. And that's what's necessary, particularly if we're going to engage in something as important as representing and conveying the very words of the Creator of the universe. We're flawed conduits. But God only works through flawed conduits. So it's important to proclaim what we have come to know and willingly admit when we're mistaken. Correct the record and then move on.
That was one of the things that initially drew me and gave you a lot of credence in my book, was reading through Yada Yahweh. You would talk about, when I initially came to this is what I thought. But then this, and this were presented to me, and okay, I was wrong, and this is what it is. The fact that you were willing to do that, and I try and do that same thing with what I've been working on lately. When I come to a verse, I'll acknowledge several points where I'm like, when I first read this, I had no clue. Or when I first read this, I was thinking this. But by the time I finished it, by the time I looked into this and that, I completely changed. And to me, you have to do that. If you're not willing to evolve, you're not going to go anywhere. And admitting you're wrong doesn't lose you credibility. It just means that you didn't have as much information at point A as you have now, and so you changed your view based on the information.
And most of the time it's kind of an evolution. And It's part of growth. It's part of learning. It's part of what we're going to do for all eternity. If we had all of the answers and we were completely and totally right about everything at this point, what would be the value of an eternity of learning, of discovery?
No.
What would be the advance that we would gain from the infinite increase from being 3.5 dimensional to 4, 5, 6, and 7? We're going to be purview to things we can't even fathom.
Yeah.
And you think about it, if you
And
weren't willing to admit when you were wrong,
that's kind of the joy of the whole thing is growing by learning and finding confirmation, and it's a great joy. Such great pleasure is found in it, and it's an honor. It's a privilege to be able to correct what may have been misunderstood. And it's a thrill to have
some
people.
areas you're genuinely wrong.
I was wrong when I thought there was a renewed covenant, and I was just wrong. There isn't one.
And the evidence came, and you went, you know what? I tried to defend my position as best as I could, but the evidence is so overwhelming that I was wrong. I am going to, you went through a complete overhaul of Yada Yahweh to remove every reference to Paul that was positive because, the
evidence
led you there.
Right. And then the new perspective was really empowering and enlightening and enriching.
New information.
Correct. That's what we all should be doing. And now today, as I read the emails that come through from readers and translators, I find that what we have created together is a family that is constantly learning, constantly growing. And now I'm learning from those who I once taught. What a marvelous affirmation of the purpose of being observant.
Well, I think it's even greater if you remember what Yahweh said to Abraham, talking about Yishak. He said, "I will grow as they will grow." He's talking about joining. So it's greater than just how much smarter we can get or how much more we can learn. So the pure pleasure of it. Yahweh's going to be learning stuff too.
That's right. He's benefiting from our relationship.
Yeah. He
finds great pleasure and enjoyment and enrichment when we go from wrong to right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, God grows.
Yeah.
He has to grow. Otherwise, he wouldn't be infinite.
That blows a few Christian concepts and messes away, too.
Yeah. He's not omnipresent, nor omniscient, nor all-powerful.
He doesn't even want to be.
That can't be, doesn't want to be, will never be, would never want to be.
It would be a detriment to be.
Oh, tremendous detriment.
Tremendous
detriment.
All existence.
Yep.
That's true.
The truth is far more interesting, far more wonderful, far more, actually more powerful, more loving, more enjoyable, better. Makes us far more important, actually, doesn't it? That God grows because of our relationship with him. Yeah. It's marvelous. I like the fact that God benefits from us. I like that fact. I feel really good about that. We should all feel good about it. We should feel good that our children and our children's children benefit from us and that we benefit from them. All great. Yeah. Well, fellas, we reached a good stopping point. We'll pick this up next week. I'm glad that BTR cooperated. We were able to bring this program.
Yes.
Been a lot of fun.
All right. Shalom, shalom, y'all. Have a good
shalom.
Time.
Yes.
Have a good week.
Shalom Shabbat.
Okay.
Good night.
Night.
Night.